This is the brand new Garmin Edge 540 cycling GPS. I've been putting it through its paces, up climbs, down climbs, over cobbles, down cobbles, through miserably sucky workouts, all the goodness to see how well it works, both the good and the bad of the new hardware features, as well as the software features. In fact, I've been doing the same thing with the Garmin Edge 840, which was also announced. You can find that review up in the corner. Now, before we talk about all the newness, how much is this going to set you back? $349 for the base edition and $449 for the Solar edition. This is essentially a $50 increase over the prices for the Edge 530 when it was released 4 years ago. Now, of course, there is an absolute bucket load of newness here. Like, it's actually staggering. Now, the very first and most obvious addition is the Solar option. Now, you can see it here on the outer edge. I've put a light there. That little red section, that is the Solar portion right there. The idea is that just like the Edge 1040 Solar or many other Garmin wearables prior to that, like the Phoenix and Instinct series and Forerunner series, this allows you to get solar power while you're out riding as well as at sleep. Now, there's two different sections of the display. That red section that I showed you around the outside edge, that has 100% photovoltaic level. Now, there's some technical nuance there, but we'll just go with 100% to keep things kind of simple. Versus over the entire screen itself is a 15% photovoltaic level. This means that the screen on the Solar edition is a little bit darker, or at least appears a little bit darker, than the non-Solar edition because that kind of solar layer, that thin solar layer that you can't even see, but does make the screen a little bit dimmer. Now, on the Solar edition, while you're out riding, you'll see another data page you can add in there that shows you the solar time gained. Now, this is showing you the additional time that you've gained from that ride. So if you did a 4-hour ride and it shows you 30 minutes gained, that means you still burned through 3.5 hours of battery. This is just like additive battery down the road. It's not a ton of battery. So you can see one of my rides last week, super sunny day, 3 or so hours of riding. I didn't really gain a lot in the grand scheme of solar. That's like the same as plugging it in for like 5 minutes, right? So it's not a ton. And then inversely on really crappy cloudy days, like again a couple days ago, almost 2-hour ride, really dark overcast skies. In that case, I gained virtually nothing. It just simply isn't worthwhile. You can see the battery chart on the screen here of what they claim, both for the 540 and the 840 Solar side by side. And you can see with the additive of solar down at the bottom there. The second way is if you go into sleep mode, you can also gain battery there. It'll show you the solar intensity level as it turns off. And I put it out on the kind of like handle railing of my deck for a while on a really sunny day. And for about 2 hours of full sun and another about 2 hours of like half sun, as you can see, it didn't gain much percentage at all, like barely 1 to 2% on these different units. Now, that little bit of added space for the solar panel does come at a cost. It's simply chunkier. It's a little chubby thing. So you can see kind of side by side. And it's not a big deal. You only notice it like for the first minute or so that you use it, and then you're like, it's fine, it's by computer. All of the 540 and 840 share the exact same case shell. So solar, non-solar, doesn't matter. They're all identical in case size. Now, the big new headliner feature, software feature, if you will, on the 540 series is the addition of Freestyle ClimbPro. Now, ClimbPro has been around in the past. So ClimbPro is something that allowed you, if you had a course loaded, let's say you were going to go do an epic climb like Alpe d'Huez or whatever the case may be, you load that particular course up and you can see all the climbs leading up to that, including that main climb. So as long as you got a route loaded, you can see every single climb. And as you're riding along, you'll see the distance to the top of the climb, you'll see the gradient at the top, so the actual gradient displayed as well. The only downside, though, was that it required that you had a course or route loaded. So now they've introduced something called Freeride ClimbPro. This is essentially modeled after what Hammerhead introduced a year ago when they did the exact same thing. And allows you just to ride, and then it shows you the exact same thing as it would with a course loaded on ClimbPro. The conditions to trigger are exactly the same. Everything's the same here, except that you don't need to load it ahead of time. Now, in terms of how well this works, I divide it into roughly 2 categories. For climbs that are like really clear cut, so you go up a giant mountain pass, and at the top, the only place you can go is back down again, or whatever the case may be, the road ends, something like that. In that case, it works flawlessly. Like, it's great. Happy days. The second scenario is where you're going up and the road might split, maybe like A or B, right? Or you go to the top and then it flattens out for a while and then it goes up again somewhere else. That sort of like variable condition. In that case, it kind of depends. ClimbPro will try to figure out what you're doing. It's going to look at all the heat map and popularity data and say, you know what? Most riders go to A, therefore we're going to give the climb data to A. And like 90% of the time, it nailed the correct routing, but every once in a while it'll miss. Garmin says that they know there's probably some fine-tuning to happen there in the same way there was fine-tuning when ClimbPro first came out. In the same way when Hammerhead released their freestyle climbing feature, there's also some tweaks in the coming months afterwards. Probably the same thing here as well. Now, with that is a new feature called ClimbPro Explorer. So if I just tap up here to the top and I go down through this little list, you'll see Climb Explorer right there. And this shows me all the climbs nearby that meet a given threshold. So if I press into this and go up into the filtering, I can see I put a 100-kilometer radius because I live in Amsterdam and I got to go big to find some hills around here. And then I can choose the difficulty levels, the terrain type, sort, ascending order, etc. And then I can choose one of these given climbs and crack it open and see what it's all about. Now here is some imagery from a location that has more climbs when I was out riding in Belgium last week. And then after this, you can just simply choose to route to that given location. So you can say, hey, I want to go ride this climb, and off I go. It's also worthwhile noting, by the way, that the way they do this is they pre-cache all of this map data in here. Every single climb in the world is pre-cached in the map download that you have. As a result, those maps have exploded in size to accommodate that. But it means that it's instant. Like you saw how quickly that loaded up that list of 150 climbs nearby. So 150 climbs within a 100-kilometer radius, like that, which is super impressive. Also super impressive, if you were to whack that like button or subscribe button right now, it really does help out this video and the channel quite a bit. I can't emphasize that enough. The next new feature here is the multi-band GPS. So if I back out of this here, we'll go back up the top and go down through this whole list. Down. Sorry, I went past it. You can see GPS right there. I tap again. There is no touchscreen on this, by the way, just so we're clear, buttons only. More about that in a second. And then within this, you can go ahead and choose multi-GNSS, which is otherwise known as dual frequency GPS. This is something we've seen introduced on plenty of devices recently, the Edge 1040 last summer, as well as the Wahoo Roam and plenty of other devices out there. It means incredibly accurate GPS. Now, in this top option right there, this is going to burn more battery life. Here's that battery chart again. You can see the multi-GNSS option versus the basic option. You are going to burn more battery life, but if you're mountain biking or in the trees or something like that, it's definitely worth it. If you're somewhere else, it probably doesn't matter too much. And we'll talk about GPS accuracy later on in the video. In the meantime, a very quick one, it's got USB-C now. You can see that on the bottom there, USB-C charging port. Simple as that. Now, the most obvious one besides that is the fact that it's a revamped user interface. You can see this right here. This is essentially mirroring the Edge 1040 and also the Edge 840 user interface. These right here are the widget glances. So if you go down, you can customize these, keep on going all the way down to the bottom. I've added a few like a cute load and stuff that we'll talk about in just a second. I can choose add here, and these are all the glances that are currently added. And then I can also choose add glance, or I can long hold up here to get that little pop out option, and I can choose additional ones to add into this. So I can choose location search, for example, and then long hold again to access that blue thing. And then now we have location search right there. In fact, this is immediately showing another new feature I was going to talk about later on, but we'll just do it right now. You have now the ability to use your phone to type in things. So right now, you see this little icon? This means I can grab my phone, the Garmin Connect app will open up. And so now I can use my phone. So I can just type in, we'll just type pasta. Can I find pasta nearby? If I can spell it right, pasta. We'll find anything pasta. There we go. We got lots of pasta options within just a couple kilometers. Note how fast that was, by the way. That was almost instant to respond. It's not using the phone for any of that, by the way. It's just using the phone to type the stuff in here because there is no touchscreen display on this. So that's a cool touch. Get it? I'm trying, okay? Now, one of the features you saw back there, if I go back here, is the new training status options. So I'm gonna go down to that, go down real quick. This is training status. You had training status on the 530 and 830 in the past, but this is training status version 2.0, which basically means that it's gonna try to not show you the unproductive message as often. You have to try pretty hard to get unproductive here. So in this case, I'm in maintaining. It's because my VO2 max is basically flatlined and my cute load is in the green there. So if I go down, you can see right here, this is my VO2 max. Having some problems with VO2 max on Garmin devices the last 6 months. Hasn't changed. I've had dramatic increases in both my FTP as well as my training volume, and it seems pretty much stuck. And that's problematic because that means that this stays stuck on maintaining most of the time too. Anyways, setting that aside for the moment, this is a cute load. This is showing you a training load over the last 7 days. Mine's relatively high right now. I took today off, and yesterday was kind of an easier day in the grand scheme of things. Going down again, my exercise load over the last 7 days, my load focus over the last 28 days, essentially showing you the same thing as up here, but for the last 28 days. Going down again, you have my cycling ability. This is new in the Edge 540 as well, and it came from the Edge 1040, and it says that I'm basically an all-rounder. So this is giving me like a profile of who me as a cyclist is. And if I tap on View Analysis, you can see the different kind of levels here, my anaerobic, my aerobic capacity, and aerobic endurance. And if I choose View Courses, I can choose a given course, and it'll tell me about this course and how I'll do on that course. So if I go on down here, we'll see course demands. And you can say this course is fairly short. You need high aerobic capacity for optimum performance. So if I go down here, you can see Power Guide as an option. What Power Guide allows you to do is to go ahead and add the course ahead of time in either Garmin Connect or on the device, and then it creates a basically race plan, if you will. You can see it right here, me creating the Power Guide for this particular Belgium course that I did. In this case, you can see that has an average power of 203 watts, a max power of 239 watts. So you can see the course profile right there. But if I change my goal effort right here, I can increase that. We'll go up to right about there or so. It's going to recalculate that. And so my new estimated time is 1.5 to 2.5 hours. Now, if I go on down here, you can see my FTP, my riding position, my gear weight. I can change all these things, my road terrain, and then the splits down here are the cool part. The idea being that you can adjust this both ahead of time as well as in real time on the course itself. If you're just not having it that day, you can tweak these downwards. Now, as you're riding along, you'll see the actual Power Guide option there, and it shows you a mini map of the course profile, and it shows it's coming up, and it shows you the splits for each elevation section. So those climbs, for example, it wants you to nail those climbs, and then different parts of the flats and so on. It's a super cool feature, roughly kind of like Best Bike Split, but not as advanced as Best Bike Split is. In their case, they have aerodynamic information, rolling resistance information, lots of other things. Here, it's just kind of like, hey, you want to target this time? We'll get you there based on your particular cycling profile. Next, they've added real-time stamina. You can see this here on the screen. As you're riding along, it's basically going to take your heart rate and power data and go ahead and figure out how long you can ride that particular intensity for. This was introduced about a year and a half ago with a Phoenix 7, along with a 1040 and other devices since then. And overall, I find it pretty darn accurate. Now, the next feature is the ability to add a race and have a training plan built out for that particular race or event. So you can go on Garmin Connect on your phone or on the website. You can create an event and you can actually add a course to it. In fact, you should add a course to it because it's going to custom tailor your plan to that particular course profile. You can choose the exact time and start date. So I added an event in there, and you can see this right here on the screen, primary event right there. And it shows me kind of the course profile for that, as well as information about it. But in addition, it's going to give me all of the workouts leading up to that. So if I go to workouts, for example, here, daily suggested workouts, I can see the workouts over the next week and a little more beyond that, for example. So I got these base workouts here, but here's a threshold one. I can tap into that, and I can see it's got a 15-minute warm-up, and it's got these repeats 3 times at 269 watts, at 314 watts, and it'll just walk me through this workout as I'm out riding. And then on top of that, it'll go ahead and show me my different periods for that. So if I click up here, I can choose plan overview. I can see my base phase, my build phase, peak phase, taper phase. That's the actual race date, and then the recovery phase down there. And that was all kind of there in the Edge 1040 in a soft launch since last fall. But now over the last few months, they've added better sync in there. So we'll actually look at your wearables data too. Next up is some new navigation bits here. So I'm gonna go on back to here, go down to navigation. You can see this navigation panel. I can browse the map. I can look at courses, mountain bike. I can search, for example, save locations, etc. If I go to search, you'll see the new categories. So there's bike kind of forward categories, bike repair shops, convenience stores, restrooms, water stops. If I go to bike shops up here, you'll see these all populate virtually instantly. There we go, boom, that's that quick. And keep in mind, this is Amsterdam. There's a gazillion bike shops here, as you can see. This is all within 1 kilometer, and that kind of crazy. But the idea is that this is all instantly there, and it's all bike focused. In the past, the stuff on the Edge 530 and 830 was kind of more like car focused. This just makes more sense. You can, of course, choose one of these things and then instantly route to it if you want to. Now, let me just show you a key difference between the Edge 540 and the 840 in this particular menu, because this is kind of notable. So you can see search tools there, search tools here. Watch, obviously I have touchscreen over here, so that makes it easier. I tap into here, and you can see now I can only search for cities here, and it's just going to basically do a nearby search, versus over here I can add a given address, intersection, or GPS coordinates. Now, some people might use this all the time. Me, I have never ever use this in a real life scenario outside of like testing something. I've never actually used this. I just don't route that way in a bicycle. Instead, I'm going to route using a course, right? I'm going to go back here. I have a course already loaded. I'm going to say, hey, choose one of these courses, load it up, look at that, and then go off and ride that particular roundabout course. In terms of recalculating, that's where some of the big changes are. In the past, with an Edge 830, 530, etc., it would immediately start recalculating when off course, even if it was just briefly, and sometimes that would take forever. Now, though, like with the 1040, it shows us a new little screen that basically says, hey, do you want to pause navigation? Do you want to automatically recalculate? And then if we start recalculating, here's different ways you could recalculate, including like rejoining the course and skipping and so on. This is great if you want to like just go take a picture a couple hundred meters away at the beach or something and don't want it to recalculate everything and redo your whole route. You just want to like pause for a second and then go do your thing. Now at this point, we've got to talk a little bit about the button situation here. So in the case of the Edge 840, it has buttons and touch, right? Pretty straightforward. You can touch things like this, blah, blah, blah. And it's got all the buttons on the side, which is new to the 840, the ability to have buttons on both sides versus the past, there was not really many buttons, just the start and stop button and the power button. Now it's got all the same buttons. These two cases are identical, except the 540 does not have touch. And I don't know if it's just me or if it's Garmin or some combination, but I have found that using the buttons in the 540 has been a little bit frustrating, to be honest, and more so than I remember the 530 in the past. If you know me from the past, you know that like forever and ever, I have recommended the 5X series over the 8X series, the button series over the touchscreen display series every time, for the 510 compared to the 810, the 520 compared to the 820, the 530 compared to the 830, and so on. This is the first time I'm saying go with the 840 over the 540. And the reason is that for a lot of these buttons, I'm probably making this look easy because I'm like cutting out all my mistakes here, but there's just a lot of things where I'm like, oh, I don't know where I am. Like, so I choose road, that's fine, and I start a ride, and then you want to get back to the menu item to get to the bottom, and it's like, how do I do that? I go here, so I hold now, and I get to here, and then I go up. Okay, so now I'm here, but now I got to go down to find the section I want. Try doing that while you're riding. Versus over here, all you do is I go swipe and I'm there. I'm done. And somehow this device compared to the 530 became less easy to use. Now we're gonna get into 3 sections of accuracy here. The first one is gradient responsiveness. So this is different than ClimbPro. This is how fast the internal sensors in this unit respond to pitches and gradients. In order to test this, I've been putting this through the paces on a ton of different climbs. And I'm comparing it to the 840, the 1040, as well as the Hammerhead Crew 2 and the Wahoo Roam 2. All on the bike at the same time, all recording just to see how this all works out. In a nutshell, there's basically 2 kind of climbs. There's those climbs that are going like this, and then boom, straight up solid FU, like 20% climb. In those scenarios, the Garmin units across the board are slower than the Hammerhead Crew and the Wahoo Roam units. The Hammerhead's by far the fastest, about 10 seconds faster, and then about 8 seconds later, you get the Wahoo units, and then about 2 seconds after that, you get the Garmin units. Now, if you're talking more gradual climb like this, you won't notice any difference. Basically, there's, again, that like 10-ish second smoothing, give or take, sometimes a little faster, sometimes a little slower, depending on the climbs. But what's important to understand is another key component of this, which is ClimbPro data. Now, ClimbPro is all pre-populated map data. In that case, if I'm looking at, going out and doing a climb, where that climb is gonna last 30 minutes or 40 minutes or even an hour or so, then the map data on Garmin is way better than the map climb gradient data on the Hammerhead. Meaning that, yes, that first 10 seconds of that FU climb will be wrong on the Garmin, or at least latent, not wrong, it'll be delayed on that first 10 seconds, but then the remaining hour will be correct, versus the remaining hour in the Hammerhead is all over creation. I'll be riding along at like 6-7% grade, and it's like, boom, this is 14. I'm like, it's not 14, I'm still pedaling just fine. But it's been a problem for a couple years on the Hammerhead, and they've said that they've admitted it's their underlying map data isn't as good as Garmin's, but it's not really fixed yet. So essentially, it's a case of like, pick your poison. Do you want instantaneous gradient responsiveness on FU climbs, or do you want correct kind of upcoming gradient for the entire climb? And I guess you can kind of choose. Now, the good news, though, is that if you're talking GPS accuracy, you don't have to choose there. For that, we'll go over to the computer. Now, starting off with some mountain biking here in the trees, and this is a multi-loop course, so you're going to see the exact same route basically twice, which is kind of cool for testing GPS accuracy. And you can see it's spot on the trail, a tiny bit better than the Wahoo Roam V2, which also has multi-band GPS, just a little bit more on track, but not like meaningfully so in the grand scheme of things. Overall, very solid performance from both the 540 as well as the 840 here in the woods. Whether it be in the cities next to buildings right here, or through tunnels right here, or out in the open right here, it's been like perfect across the board, which kind of makes sense given it's the same platform as the Edge 1040, which has also been perfect for people for the last year, basically. In terms of elevation accuracy, the same as well. It's pretty much matching across the board with all the other units I have out there, except in this case when the Crew 2 didn't match those units, but otherwise, again, all the same. Okay, so overall, where are we? Well, I think on the whole, this is a great unit. It's got some quirks in gradient. I can't get my head around some of the portions of the user interface with the buttons. Now, when you're riding, it's great. It's when you try to do anything other than that. Try to do some like menu option thing where you want to change something or whatever. That's when it's like, just really, really frustrating, versus the touch on the 840 works great. But if you're not dorking with things, then it's all pretty good and pretty self-explanatory. Anyways, hopefully you found it interesting. If not, go check out my 840 review. It's pretty much the same thing as this one though, just to save you some time there, except the touchscreen works great. So there's that for you. With that, have a good one. Oh, actually, don't forget, like, subscribe, all that jazz, you have to do that. Otherwise, YouTube punishes me, and you don't want to punish me because it's just not going to end well for me, mostly. Okay, bye.